How has the Australian economy been impacted by oil price swings? Well, let's take a look. I'm Rachel Jones and you're watching Kalkine Media. Just before the latest COVID-19 variant, Omicron, hit the world, oil prices had surged to an extent that they threatened to derail economic recoveries, throwing a spanner in tightening plans of some central banks. The Australian economy was no exception. In fact, the surge in oil prices had the Reserve Bank of Australia concerned, with Governor Philip Lowe accepting that elevated global oil prices have affected the Australian headline inflation rate. Petrol prices in particular have been a substantial contributor to dents in household budgets in the recent past. The uptick in headline inflation has been fueled by a 24% rise in petrol prices over the last year. Retail and leaded petrol prices currently remain elevated across Australia. Now, petrol prices have turned out to be one of the biggest household expenses for Australians. According to analysis by CommSec, petrol is currently the fifth largest weekly expense for household budgets. On average, Aussie households are splurging $237 in petrol each month. The rise in oil prices has not only hit motorists, but also has had a toll on transport costs. In the last year, overall transport costs have risen by over 10%. That's according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. As a net importer of oil, rising oil prices tend to have a negative impact on Australia's terms of trade and on the purchasing power of national income. However, in practice, the oil price movement is partly absorbed into margins, and any pass-through tends to occur over a long period. Even as intensity of oil production has been falling in Australia for many decades, oil is still an important input into the production of many goods and services, particularly in industries such as mining, transportation, and also some parts of manufacturing. However, higher oil prices will lead to increased costs of production in these industries. Now, if you like the information in this video, don't forget to like. You can also share and comment on it. Also, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon for notifications for our latest videos. I'm Rachel, signing off for now.